Hi, I'm the sister who smiled at a wedding while everything I believed about my family was quietly falling apart. 5 minutes before my sister walked down the aisle, my husband leaned in and whispered, "Grab your coat, don't look back." I thought it was drama. I was wrong. What he showed me wasn't a mistake. It was something everyone else already knew and had decided not to tell me. They didn't need my blessing. They needed my silence. Before we begin, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Tell me in the comments. Because if you've ever been the reasonable one, this story might hit closer than you expect. There was music, live strings, and a saxophone weaving in and out of conversations. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated from round tables dressed in ivory linens. The kind of wedding that looked like it was plucked straight from a lifestyle magazine, but none of it had anything to do with me. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, next to a towering floral arrangement that smelled like money, roses, peonies, and something citrusy. Everyone looked beautiful under the amber lighting. I adjusted my dress, pulled from the back of my closet. Navy blue, safe. It wasn't the dress you wear when you're the sister of the bride. It was the dress you wear when you don't want to compete. I smiled politely at a woman I vaguely remembered from a barbecue 5 years ago. She didn't remember me. That was fine. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt uninvited in a place I'd been explicitly invited to. A waiter passed with champagne. I took one, sipped once. I watched my parents across the room, Mom in her third glass of wine, already laughing too loud, Dad listing slightly, nodding like a senator. Neither of them had spoken to me tonight except for a brief, "You made it," when I arrived. No hug, no thank you for the centerpieces I'd helped pick, the late-night phone calls with vendors I made while juggling my own work and kids. They weren't mean, just forgetful in the way people get when you stop being a headline in their lives. My sister, glowing in her dress, stood next to her soon-to-be husband. They looked like they belonged to this room. He whispered something in her ear, and she laughed like she hadn't heard a joke that good in years. People clapped as the band shifted songs. Someone toasted. I stayed by the flowers, not hiding, just staying out of the way. That's a skill I'd learned young. Don't insert yourself. Don't demand space. I smiled when someone looked my way. A soft, controlled curl of the lips. Not too much, not fake, just safe. It was the smile I kept in my pocket for family events. The one that said, "I'm fine, really." I'd worn it to funerals, to graduations where I wasn't listed in the program, to birthdays where I took the photos but wasn't in them. It wasn't a weak smile, it was armor. I'd learned early on that being difficult, even just by needing acknowledgement, wasn't welcomed. So I smiled instead. Then he appeared, my husband. Jacket open, no drink in hand. His eyes scanned the room before they landed on me. His pace didn't match the rhythm of the party. He didn't walk like a guest enjoying himself. He walked like someone looking for a fire exit. He reached me and stood close. Too close. I felt the heat of his breath before he spoke. "Grab your coat," he said low. "We're leaving right now." I blinked. He didn't look at me. His eyes were on the dance floor, like he was waiting for someone to notice. Then he turned to me and added, "Smile at the guests. Don't look back." I didn't ask why. I didn't move for a full second. But inside, something shifted. My throat went dry, the way it does right before a bad phone call. My hands felt empty, even though I was still holding the glass. He reached out and took it from me gently, set it on the corner of a table. I nodded. There was no argument, no pause for explanation, just instinct. And whatever it was, it had to be serious. We walked together across the ballroom. I kept my smile on, not too wide, controlled, measured. People nodded at me as we passed. One of my cousins even raised a glass toward me, like I'd just delivered a killer toast. I nodded back. Every cell in my body wanted to turn around, to see if someone had noticed something was wrong. But I didn't. We reached the exit doors. The music was still playing, a slow jazz number. I looked once more at my sister, now swaying with her fiancé under the spotlight. She looked radiant. My husband held the door for me. Cool air hit my face as we stepped outside. The parking lot was quiet, just the soft hum of nearby traffic and the sound of our shoes against pavement. He walked ahead to the car, opened the passenger door, and waited. I got in without speaking. He got in next to me, started to pull the door closed, then stopped. He reached over, took my hand, and gave it one firm squeeze. "Trust me," he said. That's when I knew. Whatever he'd seen was big enough to make us disappear. The door closed behind us with a muted thud, and the music vanished instantly, like someone had cut a wire. One moment there were violins and laughter, the next there was only the low hum of the parking lot lights and the distant rush of traffic from the main road. I sat still in the passenger seat, my coat folded awkwardly on my lap. My hands had started to tremble, just enough that I noticed it. When I glanced over, I saw his hands on the steering wheel. They were shaking too, not wildly, tightly, like he was holding himself together by force. For a second, neither of us spoke. He didn't start the car. That was when the weight of it settled in. This wasn't about an argument. It wasn't about a comment taken the wrong way or a family misunderstanding that would blow over by morning. If it were, we'd already be driving, already talking, already planning what to say later. Instead, he just sat there. The headlights from another car swept past us as it pulled out, the sound of tires crunching over gravel fading quickly. I realized how alone we suddenly were. Inside that ballroom, I'd felt invisible. Out here, I felt exposed. He finally exhaled and leaned back slightly, one hand still on the wheel, the other resting between us. "Before I show you anything," he said quietly, "I need you to promise me something." I turned toward him. "What?" "Promise me you won't faint." The word landed harder than I expected. Faint. Not cry, not get upset. Faint. My confusion shifted instantly into something colder. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. My shoulders stiffened. I planted my feet on the floor mat, like I was bracing myself for turbulence. "I'm listening," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He nodded once, as if that confirmed something for him. Then he glanced toward the rearview mirror. "That's why we couldn't say anything in there," he continued. "That's why we couldn't let anyone see us arguing or asking questions. And that's why you couldn't look back." I followed his eyes, instinctively turning my head slightly before stopping myself. The venue glowed behind us, warm and inviting, like nothing in the world could possibly be wrong inside it. "Staying another minute would have made it worse," he said. "For you." "For me?" I repeated. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted the car into drive and pulled out slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter whatever fragile control he had left. We turned onto a quiet side street lined with trees and dark houses. Porch lights flickered past the windows. Normal life, dinner dishes, televisions murmuring in living rooms. It felt wrong that everything else was so calm. "It happened just before the ceremony," he said at last. 5 minutes, maybe less." My fingers curled into the fabric of my coat. "Where?" "Somewhere private," he replied, close enough that no one would think twice about him stepping away. Him. He still hadn't said a name, and somehow that made it worse. I wanted to ask a dozen questions. What exactly had happened? Who else knew? Why him? Why tonight? Why now? But something in his tone told me not to push yet. This wasn't information to be dragged out. It was something he was trying to lower gently, like setting down something fragile and dangerous at the same time. We stopped at a red light. The silence thickened again. That's when I noticed his phone. He'd picked it up without me realizing. It rested in his palm, screen dark, his thumb hovering near the edge. He wasn't scrolling, he wasn't texting. He was holding it the way people hold documents they wish didn't exist. I stared at it, my eyes refusing to look anywhere else. That small rectangle suddenly felt heavy enough to tilt the car. "That's not a rumor," I said quietly. "No," he replied. "It's not. And it's not someone's opinion." "No." I swallowed, my mouth dry. The pieces were starting to form a shape I didn't want to recognize yet. Whatever was on that screen wasn't gossip, it wasn't speculation, it was proof. The light turned green. He didn't move. Finally, he turned toward me and lifted the phone. When he finally turned the screen toward me, I realized this wasn't something I could unsee, and that going back inside had never been an option. He didn't speak when he hit play. There was no lead-in, no explanation. The screen lit up in his hand, and the video was already running by the time I focused my eyes. It was filmed from a slightly low angle, like someone had been sitting or crouching, half hiding. The picture was a bit grainy, but clear enough. The hallway on the screen was familiar. It was the side corridor next to the bridal suite. I'd walked through it myself earlier that day to drop off a makeup kit my sister forgot in the car. That was the same hallway, no mistaking it. And there he was, my sister's fiancé. He stood close to another woman, not a hug, not a peck on the cheek. It was the kind of closeness that carries heat. His hand was on her lower back, pulling her in like he'd done it 100 times before. Her face was tilted up. Their mouths met, slow, practiced, unhurried. I didn't gasp. My chest just locked. Like something inside me had skipped a step it couldn't get back. The camera shook slightly. Someone's quick intake of breath caught on the audio. Then it stopped recording, just like that. 10 seconds, maybe 15. That's all it took. I could barely blink. My stomach turned over, not from confusion, but from the certainty of what I'd just seen. There was no room for maybe, no wondering if it had been a goodbye kiss or a mistimed hug. It was deliberate, intimate, familiar. I didn't realize my hand had flown to my neck until I felt my own pulse pounding. Heat rushed up my face. My ears buzzed. I stared out the windshield, breathing shallow and fast, like my body was trying to stay ahead of something. He didn't say anything. My husband knew better than to add commentary. He just waited, the phone still in his hand, but no longer facing me. He was giving me time to absorb it, to translate the image into meaning. But I didn't need time. The part of me that had always suspected something deeper was wrong. She was already awake. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. So instead, I looked at the dash, at the little specks of dust, at the faint fingerprint smudges on the radio. My eyes locked onto anything still and ordinary. But my mind? It was already chasing shadows. Because it wasn't just the kiss. It was the way he touched her. Confident, casual, like it was normal. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't nerves. This wasn't a moment of cold feet before the altar. This was a habit. My husband broke the silence. That was 5 minutes before he walked down the aisle. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it the way someone says, "I'm sorry, but your test came back positive." 5 minutes. That detail mattered more than anything else. Not because of what happened, but when it happened. He'd kissed that woman, and then straightened his jacket and walked down the aisle to marry my sister, with a smile. I closed my eyes for a second, not to block it out, but to see it better. Everything made a new kind of sense now. The calm on his face during the ceremony, the way he looked so relaxed, how he whispered to her as they exchanged vows, like he couldn't wait to start their life together. But now, I realized he wasn't nervous because there was nothing at stake for him. He knew the truth, and had already chosen to lie to everyone else. That kiss wasn't the first. It wasn't even a secret, not to him. It was a routine. He knew exactly what he was doing. And so did she. The woman in the video wore a black dress, simple, low cut. My mind started running through the guest list. I'd seen her. I remembered the shoes. Silver straps, too high to be comfortable. She'd walked past me in the hallway on my way out of the restroom just before the ceremony. She didn't even look flustered. I rubbed my palms against my dress, trying to ground myself. Then, without warning, memories began flooding in. I saw myself signing documents my sister sent me last spring, something about helping her with a lease under her name because my credit's better. I remembered her handing me a folder before Christmas, asking me to just sign the last page while she helped our mom with dinner. I didn't ask questions. She was always in a rush, always flustered. I trusted her. I always signed. And now I started to wonder, what had I signed for? What had I unknowingly made easier for her, or for him? I wasn't just the quiet sister. I was the useful one. The one who kept things running in the background. The one who made sure the dress arrived on time, the hotel blocks were confirmed, the florist got paid. I was the one who handled the messes without ever asking where they came from. And now, sitting in that car, it all hit me at once. I'd been helping hold up a version of their lives that wasn't even true. My chest felt tight. My husband leaned forward slightly, waiting to see if I would speak. I didn't. I stared out the window again, not at anything, just away. I should have noticed, I whispered. No, he said gently. You trusted them. I shook my head. No, I ignored things. A silence stretched between us, thick and hard. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding. This wasn't just about that kiss. This was about a pattern, one I'd helped protect without realizing. It was about the way they'd always used my silence, my willingness to say, okay, sure, even when things didn't quite add up. I felt it in my bones. If I had gone back inside that ballroom, smiling, saying nothing, I would have become part of it, part of the lie, again. I reached for the phone and looked at the screen one last time, as if to make sure it was real. My reflection in the glass looked different now, sharper, like something had been scraped away. I handed the phone back to him with a steady hand. As I handed the phone back to him, I knew one thing for certain. I could never claim I didn't know anymore. I didn't say a word as I handed the phone back, but the silence between us changed. It wasn't stunned anymore. It was thick, deliberate. My husband started the engine. The hum of the motor sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else's night. We hadn't even made it halfway down the block before my phone lit up and buzzed. The screen showed my sister's name. Not the one getting married, the other one. The one who always stepped in to mediate, to keep the peace, to make sure we all stayed just uncomfortable enough to function. I didn't answer, not right away. My thumb hovered over the screen. She probably doesn't know what you saw yet, my husband said quietly, eyes still on the road. I nodded. I knew. But the speed of the call told me someone had already noticed we left and that I hadn't come back. By the second ring, I hit accept. Her voice came through like a script already rehearsed. Hey, where'd you two go? Is everything okay? No real concern, just the right tone of pleasant confusion. A gentle push wrapped in sugar. I paused. We left. There was a beat of silence. Oh, okay, I just thought maybe you needed air or something. But listen, can you just come back? Everyone's asking. There it was. Not a single question about what happened. No check-in, no curiosity, just come back. I didn't respond right away. She filled the space fast, like she couldn't afford the silence. Look, tonight isn't the time. We all worked so hard on this. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be, okay? My eyes met my husband's briefly. He kept his hands on the wheel, but I could see the tension return to his jaw. I wanted to laugh, or maybe cry, maybe both. It's already big, I said. You just don't know how big. She ignored that. You know how she gets, right? Let's not do this tonight. Do what? She sighed like I was the problem. Can we please not turn this into a thing? Not today, please. Just come back. Sit down, smile. No one needs to know anything. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't being asked. I was being managed. This wasn't about my feelings. It wasn't about the truth. It was about preserving the picture, the illusion, keeping everything tied up with the right colors and lighting, even if the inside was rotting. I said nothing. Just let her words roll over me. When she realized I wasn't taking the bait, her tone dropped an octave. Softer now. A whisper meant to sound like care. You don't have to say anything. Just show up. People are starting to notice. People are starting to notice. I almost choked on the absurdity of it. They weren't afraid of the betrayal. They were afraid of the disruption. My silence had always been my value. My ability to blend in, to carry burdens quietly, had made me useful. The moment I stepped out of line, even silently, I became dangerous. I can't, I said. But why not? Her voice was urgent now. You leaving like that, it makes it worse. There it was, the moral reversal. My exit, not the act, was the threat. My absence, not his betrayal, was the disruption. Just tell me what you need to hear to come back, she said, a little more pleading. I didn't even have words for the weight in my chest. I looked out the window. We were approaching our block now. Streetlights passed in slow pulses of yellow. I'm not coming back tonight, I said. Not angry, not dramatic. Just the truth. There was silence on her end now, long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. You're overreacting, she finally muttered, then ended the call. We pulled into the driveway. The porch light I'd left on glowed like a stage light, casting long shadows. I didn't get out right away. I sat there, phone in my lap, screen still lit with missed messages, 3 texts, 2 voicemails, a missed call from my mother now. My fingers twitched, but I didn't open anything. Inside, the house was quiet. We walked in together, neither of us turning on more lights than we needed. I set my shoes by the door, hung my purse on the hook, and headed for the kitchen. Poured a glass of water with shaking hands. He didn't ask me to talk. He didn't say, I told you so. He just stood nearby, like a barrier between me and the next storm. I glanced at the counter where I'd left my grocery list earlier that day. Normal life. Planning dinner, prepping for guests, making sure everything was just right for the weekend. None of that mattered now. The texts kept coming, muted buzzes from the other room. I didn't move to get them. I wasn't ignoring them. I was letting them pile up. For once, letting the urgency sit with someone else. I wasn't angry. I was done. And that scared them, because I wasn't yelling. I wasn't storming back in. I wasn't threatening to expose anyone. I wasn't sobbing on the kitchen floor. I just wasn't playing anymore. That's what scared them. They weren't afraid of what had happened. They were afraid of what I might do with it. I didn't sleep. Not really. My body lay still, but my mind kept playing the video in slow loops, rewinding, pausing, scanning every glance, every laugh, every second of betrayal caught on camera. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept watching it inside my head, over and over, like my brain needed to memorize the pain so I wouldn't forget how real it was. Morning came gently, like nothing had happened. Sunlight touched the kitchen floor like it always did. The coffee machine gurgled to life. A bird chirped outside the window, right on cue. But everything felt wrong, too still, too soft. It was like the world had dressed itself in calm, hoping I'd play along. I sat at the kitchen table with my mug, untouched, fingers wrapped around the warmth. Across from me, my husband glanced at his phone but didn't say anything. Neither of us had much to say. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was heavy. And oddly, I was grateful for it. No need to explain what we both already knew. Then my phone rang. It wasn't a surprise. I'd been expecting it since sunrise. I picked it up, already knowing the name I'd see. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice was steady, light even. "Good morning, sweetheart. I thought I'd check on you." "Morning," I said, flat. "We've all had some time to think," she started. "Nobody wants this to spiral." There it was. No asking if I was okay. No asking what happened or what I needed. Just a gentle pivot away from the truth. I stayed quiet, let her fill the silence. "Listen, your sister's exhausted. You know how these events can be. Tensions run high, people get emotional. But it's over now. We all just want peace." I blinked. Peace. Like that's what this was about. She continued, "Why don't you meet with us? Nothing formal, just coffee, somewhere neutral. I think it would help." The way she said neutral made me want to throw the mug against the wall. "I'll think about it," I said. "We'll be at that little place on Maple. Around 10? She didn't wait for a yes. She never did. By 10, I was there. Not because I trusted her, not because I forgave anyone, but because I needed to know what the performance looked like in daylight. They were already seated when I walked in. My sister, the one in the video, looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. My mother waved me over, her eyes soft with practiced warmth. "Sit, honey. We already ordered you a tea." Of course they had. I sat, but I didn't touch the tea. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned the video. It was like we jumped into a scene from a completely different movie. Weather, grandkids, a recipe my mom had just tried. I let them talk. Then my sister said, "There's something small we need to clear up. Just logistics." My body tensed. "It's about the property transfer paperwork," she said lightly. "You know how we all signed stuff to get the venue rented under the family name? There's a hiccup. We just need to update a line. Your name's still on a few things." There it was. I stared at her. "We figured you'd want to help straighten it out. You're the only one who really understands this kind of stuff." My mom chimed in. "You've always been the reliable one. You make things smoother for everyone." The compliment slid in like soft hands over a wound. Familiar, almost flattering. That itch inside me returned, the old reflex to say yes. Be useful, be agreeable, keep things moving. But I heard something else underneath. They didn't need my forgiveness. They needed my signature, not for healing, not for truth, for paperwork, for appearances, for cleanup. I took a long breath, forcing myself to sit in the silence before responding. I didn't owe them comfort. "You want me to help make this all look okay?" I asked quietly. "No," my sister said quickly. "We just want to move forward without more stress. It's already been a lot." My mother nodded. "Let's not drag this out, sweetheart. It's not who you are." She was wrong. It was who I was, just not the version they liked. I looked at the document she slid across the table. Simple lines, a familiar format, my name in bold. No explanation of context, just a request for my pen and my silence. I didn't touch it. Instead, I said, "I'll need time." Their smiles faded just a fraction. "We're really hoping this doesn't become complicated," my mother said, still sweet, but firmer now. And just like that, the warmth in the room became strategy. I stood up. "I'll be in touch." They didn't stop me. They just watched me walk out like they always had, quiet, composed, manageable. But this time I wasn't carrying what they thought I was. This time I wasn't leaving with guilt. I was leaving with clarity. For the first time, I realized they didn't need my love. They needed my name. By the time I stepped back into my house that afternoon, I already knew what I was going to do. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was something colder, calm, exact. I didn't slam doors or pace around the kitchen. I just moved in silence, like a switch had flipped inside me and taken all the noise with it. I put my phone on the table and let it buzz. They kept calling. My sister, my mother, even an uncle I hadn't spoken to in over a year. The messages started friendly, then urgent, then annoyed. I read none of them. 2 days passed like that. I wasn't hiding. I was thinking, watching, feeling how quickly people who once begged for your attention became offended by your silence. I sat in my home office, the desk still cluttered with everyday things, a grocery list, a half-filled planner, a card I hadn't mailed. It was all untouched since the wedding. I stared at a sticky note by the lamp with my login info for the shared family account. Something that seemed small last week. Now it glowed like a flare. That's when the comment came in. I didn't hear it firsthand. It came through a neighbor who'd run into my cousin at the store. One of those harmless, I just thought you should know deliveries. She always knew how this worked. That was the line. Not angry, not cruel, just casual. And it cut me in a place I didn't know was still bleeding. Not she knew what happened. Not she just found out. She always knew how this worked. That wasn't secrecy. That was expectation. I hadn't been left out. I'd been assumed. Expected to play the same role I'd always played. Quiet, dependable, convenient. It wasn't that they forgot to tell me. It's that they never thought they needed to. I pulled the filing box from under my desk. Contracts, tax documents, rental agreements, things I'd signed over the years because we need to move fast, or you're the only one they trust. There was always urgency, always flattery, always a pat on the shoulder instead of a full explanation. I flipped through the papers and they started to blur together. Same phrases, same tone. We'll explain later. Don't worry, we've got it covered. Just a signature, nothing big. And I had believed them, because I'd wanted to, because it felt good to be needed. But now I could see it clear as day. My trust hadn't been love to them. It had been a tool, a shortcut. That was the last night I slept on it. By the next morning, I had an appointment. Not with a therapist, not with my sister, with the bank. I didn't text anyone I was going, didn't make a show of it. I didn't want drama. I wanted my name back. The woman behind the desk at the bank was kind, efficient. She didn't ask why I wanted to remove myself from the joint account tied to the family business. She just slid the form across the table and offered me a pen. It felt almost too easy. As I wrote my name, I thought about every time I'd been told I was overthinking things. Every time I'd asked, should I be signing this? And they'd laughed it off. I signed slowly, clearly, like I was carving it into stone. When it was done, the banker looked at me. Anything else I can help with? Yes, I said. I want to be removed from any automatic authorizations tied to that account. Loans, bills, vendor charges, anything. She clicked a few keys, then nodded. All right, that's been removed. Do you want to add a security lock on the account itself? I paused. A lock. Yes, set one up. She asked me to choose a code phrase only I would know. I picked something no one in my family would ever guess, something from a life they never asked about, because it wasn't useful to them. When I walked out of the bank, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel smug. I just felt steadier, like I'd put my feet back on solid ground. Back home, I sat in the same chair where I'd watched the video. The same phone sat on the table. And this time, when the messages started rolling in, I didn't even look, because I knew what was happening on the other end. They were trying to transfer funds, access privileges, move things around the way they always had, quietly, quickly, confidently. but it wasn't working anymore. Less than an hour later, I got the first confused text. "Hey, are you getting some kind of error? Might just be a system thing." Then another. "Weird issue with the account. Can you check your end?" Then, "Can you call me real quick? We need to straighten something out." I didn't answer because I wasn't confused, and I wasn't where they'd left me. They didn't come knocking. They didn't call shouting. They didn't fall apart. No, what came next was sharper than any scream. It was control, tightening like a cord pulled slow. The messages kept coming, but they'd changed their rhythm. They were no longer reaching out in confusion. They were recalibrating. It started with a, "Hey, just checking in." Then, "Let's not drag this out." Then, "You know this isn't helping anyone." The language was smooth, practiced, meant to sound reasonable. But I saw the shift. The warmth was gone. Underneath each word, I could hear it. Leverage, slipping. 3 more days passed. I didn't block them. I let every message land. I wanted to see exactly how far they'd push. Then came the final one. "We're meeting tomorrow, 4 p.m. Come." Not a question, not a suggestion, an order dressed up as concern. I didn't answer, but I went. Not because they called me, because I needed to see how far they'd go. The meeting wasn't at anyone's house. It was a neutral place, a private office borrowed from a friend of the family. I knew the location, knew the setup. The furniture would be tasteful, the lighting soft, the whole space designed to calm. I arrived a few minutes early and waited in my car, staring through the windshield. I reminded myself I didn't owe them a speech. I didn't owe them a performance. I was there to listen, not to be swayed. When I walked in, they were already seated, my brother, my mother, and my aunt. Not all of them, but enough to feel surrounded. The air in the room was still, no hugs, no greetings. Just a nod from my brother and a gesture toward the chair across from him. I sat down. He leaned forward, fingers laced, voice low and even. "We're not here to fight." I nodded once, slowly. "Okay." "Things got out of hand," he continued. "No one's blaming you." That was the first flag. They only say you're not being blamed when they're already tallying how much damage you've caused. "We all want to move forward," my aunt added, voice gentler. "But we can't do that if things stay unsettled." "Unsettled," I repeated, like I was testing the word on my tongue. My mother spoke next. Her voice had that polished tone she used with guests, soft, careful, not entirely sincere. "We're just asking you to be reasonable. Let's not throw everything into chaos over a misunderstanding." There it was. A misunderstanding, not betrayal, not manipulation. A misunderstanding, like I'd misread a dinner menu. I stayed quiet. They moved on without needing my reply. "There are documents coming due," my brother said. "Transfers, filings, things that still need your name on them, for now." He didn't say, "because you're involved." He said, "for now." As if my usefulness was a temporary inconvenience. I watched his face as he spoke. He looked composed, but his hands, those gave it away. Tapping his thumb against his ring finger over and over, they were losing grip. "I know this has been hard on you," my mother said, "but you've always been the one who kept things stable." My chest tightened. I'd heard that phrase before, so many times. "You're the stable one. You're the responsible one." They never said, "You deserve to be protected." They only said, "You hold it all together." I felt something shift inside me. I didn't speak, didn't nod. I waited. That was when the tone changed again. "We're worried this might escalate," my aunt said. "There could be legal implications if things get twisted." "Reputations," my brother added, "are hard to rebuild." Still no yelling, still no insults, just pressure, layered under kindness, like poison in tea. I felt myself shrinking. The old instinct came flooding in. End this. Apologize. Say something light, something that would make them smile again. You don't want this to blow up. You don't want to be the cause. I looked down. My fingers were gripping the edge of the chair so hard they hurt. Then someone spoke. Not loud, not forceful, just clear. She didn't imagine this. It came from the far corner. My cousin Grace. Quiet, practical, rarely involved. I hadn't even noticed she was there. Everyone turned to her. She didn't flinch. She saw what she saw, Grace continued, and we all know it. Silence. For the first time in that whole meeting, no one responded right away. No deflection, no redirect, just air. And in that silence, something inside me steadied. I looked up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for their understanding. I just said the truth. I'm not signing anything else. My brother leaned back. My mother's mouth opened slightly, but she closed it again. I went on. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I'm not going to be quiet about it. And I'm not going to be guilted into fixing something I didn't break. No one interrupted. I stood up. Grace didn't look away. As I walked out, I realized something that hit deeper than anger. I no longer needed their agreement. I didn't even need their respect. I only needed my own. That was the moment I understood they would never stop pushing, and that next time they would play dirtier. I didn't hear the rumor from them. It came through a neighbor, dropped into conversation like it was harmless. You know, I always thought you carried too much weight in that family. But now they're saying you snapped. Said the wedding just set you off. She meant it kindly, I think. The way people do when they think they're offering sympathy, but are really just passing along poison in a smile. That was how I found out. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. I didn't go inside right away. I just sat there. Window cracked, the faint scent of cut grass drifting in. And in that stale, still air of my parked car, it hit me fully. They weren't defending themselves. They were rewriting this story. I was no longer the one who saw too much. I was now the problem. Inside, I turned on the kettle, more from muscle memory than intent. The phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't look. I already knew the tone. It would be phrased carefully. Not angry, not direct, not yet. I didn't pick it up until late that night. The message was short, from my brother. Can we please handle this like adults? No context, no specifics, just that quiet suggestion that I was being unreasonable. The next morning, an envelope arrived, hand-delivered, no return address. The moment I saw the handwriting, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Inside was a copy of a joint statement, typed, double-spaced. It read like a press release, clean and diplomatic. Words like miscommunication, family unity, preserving memories floated between the lines like camouflage. At the bottom was a dotted line for my signature. And then, stapled to the back, was the real piece. A screen-captured message I'd sent months ago, completely out of context. I remembered writing it. It had been a response to a panicked late-night call from my mother about finances. I'd said something like, "Whatever you need to get through this, I'll help." They'd underlined that sentence. No timestamp, no attached thread. On its own, it looked like complicity. On its own, it looked like consent. And I understood, clearly, what this was. Not a request. An insurance policy. I was the fail-safe, the shield, the one they could hold up if things collapsed. She knew. That's all it would take. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the paper, and for the first time in days, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was finally obvious. I wasn't the witness. I was the fall guy. My plan all week had been to show them I wasn't rattled. I had planned to speak with calm, to use facts, to let the truth stand taller than their spin. But this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a setup. And every second I spent clarifying or softening was just more time they had to prepare the next move. So I stopped. I didn't write back. I didn't draft a more complete version of the events. Instead, I made a quiet appointment at the office of a legal advisor, someone not connected to any of them, someone I could trust to read the fine print and say the things I didn't want to admit I was afraid of. We sat in a small room with beige walls and a clock that ticked too loudly. She read the papers page by page. Then she folded them neatly and said, "If you sign this, you're owning the story they've written." And that was it. I slid the papers back into the envelope and said, "Then I'm not signing." The woman nodded. "There'll be backlash." "I know," I said. It came faster than I expected. By the time I got back to my car, my phone was already lighting up. Calls, voicemails, a new text from my aunt. "This will tear everything apart. Are you okay with that?" Yes, because I had finally let go of the need to keep things intact that were already broken. That evening, they called a meeting. Not a request, another demand. This time in a small office downtown, neutral territory again, but laced with expectation. I showed up, but I didn't bring the papers. They were all already seated when I walked in. Calm faces, polite nods. My brother stood to greet me, but his jaw was clenched. "You didn't bring the documents," he said. "No," I said. "We were hoping to finalize this," my mother offered, voice smooth, eyes tight. "I won't be part of it," I said, my voice even. "And I won't clean it up." "You're making this ugly for no reason." "No," I said again. "You already made it ugly. I just won't pretend otherwise." There was a pause, brief but heavy. "You always cared about family," my aunt said quietly. "You're really willing to walk away from all of it?" I looked at her. "I'm not walking away from family," I said. "I'm walking away from pretending this is one." And for the first time, I didn't smile. And I didn't explain. It had been a few weeks since that last meeting. Nothing explosive followed. No more door-slamming calls or guilt-laced voicemails. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you only get when people have finished rewriting the story without you. At first, I mistook it for peace. Then I realized it was distance. They weren't waiting for me to come back. They'd moved on without me, publicly. The photos went up first, wedding pictures, cropped and filtered, floating around on social media like nothing had happened. Big smiles, raised glasses, sun-soaked laughter. But in one photo, a wide shot of the reception dinner, there was an empty chair. Mine. No one tagged me, no one mentioned my absence. But the chair was there, a clean gap in a carefully planned image. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. There was no jolt, no anger. Just that quiet recognition of being erased. Not out of spite, out of convenience. A few days later, someone I barely knew messaged me. "Hey, just wanted to say I saw the photos. Hope you're okay. Everyone's saying you chose not to come to keep things peaceful." That was very mature. Mature. That word stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. It was meant as praise, I knew that. But it also sealed what they'd done. They didn't say I was right. They said I was reasonable. They turned my silence into diplomacy. They turned my refusal into poise. And just like that, they closed the curtain on the show, neatly, smoothly, without ever acknowledging the real mess behind it. So no, I wasn't called names. I wasn't disowned. I was simply left out. Invitations stopped. Group chats got quieter. Birthdays passed with just a thumbs up or a forwarded meme. It didn't sting as much as I expected, I'd already grieved most of it while I was still in the middle of it. What stayed, though, was the strange sense of weight shifting. For years, I'd carried this invisible obligation: hold it together, be the bridge, keep the peace. And now that role had disappeared with barely a whisper. I was no longer expected to save anything, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. One morning, I caught my reflection in the window. I'd just finished making coffee, still in my robe, hair pulled back. I wasn't smiling, and that's what stopped me, because for so long, my default expression had been something soft, polite, safe, a signal to the world that I wasn't dangerous, that I wouldn't rock the boat. But that morning, I just looked neutral, and it didn't feel wrong. I didn't need to contort myself into someone easier to digest. Not anymore. There was no dramatic declaration, no status update, no family-wide email. Just a quiet shift. I no longer showed up to smooth things over. I no longer offered context to protect other people's reputations. I stopped explaining why I had left. I stopped defending why I stayed away. I didn't need them to agree. I didn't need them to admit it. I only needed to know I wasn't crazy. And now I knew. It took me months to stop rehearsing conversations in my head. Imaginary moments where I'd say the right thing and they'd finally understand. But eventually those scripts faded. I went back to work. I started walking in the mornings again. I cleared out a drawer full of birthday cards I'd saved out of habit, not affection. And in the middle of all that, something else happened. I got a message from someone I hadn't expected, my cousin's daughter, young, barely 20. I know we don't talk much, but I just wanted to say, I saw how you handled all of that, and thank you. It made me feel less crazy about stuff in my own family. That's when I understood. I wasn't the only one who'd been told to smile and stay quiet. I wasn't the only one who had played the role just to survive it. And maybe, by stepping away without setting the place on fire, I had made space for someone else to choose a different path too. No revenge, no vindication, just one less person pretending. So no, this story doesn't end with reunions or apologies. It ends with something quieter, but maybe stronger. It ends with me knowing that I walked away with my name, my clarity, and my boundaries still intact. And that's enough. I didn't faint. I didn't go back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't smile just to survive.